What is up, my dudes? It's All Fun and James Zero, and today I want to talk about the length between wipes. No, I'm not referring to your shitty ass when your mum leaves you to deal with it yourself. And no, mum, I don't think it matters that I'm almost 25. A kid isn't just for Christmas, they're for life. What I'm actually talking about is the resets that occur periodically in Escape from Tarkov. Of course, the wipe is coming up on Thursday, and as most of you know, wipes in Tarkov are a big deal. Some dread their arrival as it means all of their hard work will disappear in an instant as they are reset to zero and have to start all over again. Others look forward to it, as many consider the early stages of a wipe to be the most exciting, as everybody starts from a level playing field and rushes to get access to the good guns and dominate the competition early on. Either way, it is a necessary part of the game's cycle. It prevents saturation of the game economy with high-end gear and guns, and it also creates excitement and generates attention for the game each time a wipe occurs. With that being said, I'm going to propose some ideas today that would extend the length between wipes and also hopefully reduce some of the gear saturation that happens later on in a wipe. Some of these ideas have been floated before by content creators like Landmark and Tweak, but I've expanded upon them slightly, and others are established game design concepts used in other games with player-driven economies that I think could benefit Tarkov if implemented properly. Ultimately, the purpose of these suggestions is to think of ways that can elongate the early and mid game, kind of like the weird pills I bought online for my penis, but instead of giving me kidney failure, they actually make it longer. I personally think early and mid wipe are some of the most fun periods of the game, when wearing high level armor and finding rare gun attachments means more than just an increase in the number at the top of your stash. For the sake of this video, I will define late wipe as being the point in a Tarkov wipe when a significant portion of the player base have access to class 5 or above armor, best in slot weapon attachments, and late game hideout upgrades such as the Bitcoin farm. It's not that there is anything inherently wrong with a large number of people having access to these things, but it is undeniable that when the game is saturated with high-end gear and everybody is running around with 60-round laser beams, the gameplay can get a bit stale after a while. Early wipe combat feels much more rewarding because the guns are harder to use, armor is more effective, meaning accuracy is more important, and everybody's skills are relatively low, meaning the game isn't holding their hand quite as much. For that reason, and I think many would agree, Battlestate's goal should be, and from my understanding it is their stated intention, to make the early game last longer and increase the time between wipes. The idea of a prestige system is something that has been discussed in the Tarkov community many times before, and even Nikita himself has said that something like this could be implemented in the future. Now, before all the hardcore FPS neckbeards start getting blue in the face at the idea of Tarkov having a similar feature to COD, hear me out. A prestige system would be really cool for a lot of different reasons that I'll get into in a minute, but first, let me explain how I imagine it would work. The way I envisage this system working is something like this. You reach a certain level, for example level 50, you've obtained Kappa and have also reached a certain stash value threshold, let's say 30 mil. At this point, you have the option to reset your character and start again fresh, but now you have a golden dog tag. You do it again, you get a platinum dog tag. You manage to do it 3 times in a wipe, you get a diamond dog tag. Now just imagine how awesome it would be to show off your gold, platinum or diamond dog tag on stream or in clips. Not only that, but think how cool it would be as a low level player to get that lucky head eyes on some uber chad, scurry over to their body and find a diamond dog tag. You'd be the happiest rat in Tarkov and it would hold pride of place in your stash. This would be a super cool way for people to show off their talent whilst also acting as an effective item sink that would remove money and items from the economy, thus helping to slow inflation. This next one is another item sink and would be fairly easy to implement as the scav case system already exists. My proposal would be to expand that system to allow people to equip the scavs that they send out to find things on their behalf, in addition to the payments that are already required. In return for equipping them with armor and weapons, you could get an increased chance of getting streamer items amongst your rewards, depending on the quality or value of the equipment you provided to them. This would effectively remove items from the game without the return on investment inflating the economy. Streamer items carry an intrinsic value because they are used to obtain the Kappa, but have no other uses outside of this and hold little monetary value. I for one think this would not only serve the purpose of acting as an item sink, but would also be a cool little party management minigame that a lot of people would enjoy, myself included. Put a minimum level on reserve and labs. This one will probably be the most controversial and also the most simple of the 3, but honestly I think it could have the biggest impact. Not only will it elongate the early game, but I strongly believe it would go a long way to slow down the efforts of hackers and gold farmers. It's already been discussed by many, but I can't miss it out of any discussion of how to improve the life cycle of a wipe. Anyone who has played this game for more than a wipe or has taken the time to research successful strategies to get rich quick or to get ahead of the game early in a wipe will know that the fattest loot is on reserve and labs. The main issue in reference to stretching the early game is reserve, as of course labs already has an entry cost that puts a lot of players off in the early game, as it is a lot of money to gamble when you are still building your stash value up. However, I have still included it as the value of loot in labs is insanely high and thus it is a prime target for hackers. So how would a minimum level barrier affect the length of the early game and help to disrupt the efforts of hackers? Well, it's quite simple and it's mostly because of one thing: raiders. For those who don't know, raiders are like super scavs that are equipped with much higher quality gear than regular scavs. They can have Altons, Bastions, HKs, M4s and all sorts of rare and expensive equipment that is usually only accessible once max traders are unlocked. In the early stages of a wipe, it is quite common for players to go into reserve and try to farm raiders for a chance of getting this high level gear. This means that if somebody is lucky enough, they can be walking around with class 5 and 6 armor on the first day of the wipe. How overpowered is that? It's not just the raiders either. Both maps are renowned for having high density, high value looting areas that in many cases are the only sources for super rare endgame items like phased array elements and VPXs. By locking these maps behind a level gate or a task that takes a little while to get to, BSG can slow down the inward flow of high level gear and at the same time slow down hackers when their old accounts are banned and they have to start a new one. I don't know what the exact level at which these maps should be locked behind. I lean towards the 20 to 30 mark, but I'm not a professional game designer and I don't have access to the information that BSG does, so I can't definitively say what would be best. I mean, hey, maybe BSG has already considered this and is aware of some fatal flaw in this idea that I have not envisaged. Remember, this is just about discussing ideas rather than demanding features be implemented immediately. Some might say it's unfair on the casual players. Others might argue that this would push the chads and hackers into other, safer maps, like customs. And of course, there would be those who would complain that it's not as easy to make money in the beginning of the wipe. Ultimately, this game is not and has never been catered to a casual audience. Nikita has said as much countless times. Also, the argument that chads and hackers would spread out into other maps doesn't hold much water either. Chads are present in any map. Watch Willa's or Landmark stream and you can guarantee that you'll see them run customs and factory on the regular. Furthermore, those high school players manage to level very quickly, so a minimum level gate would only really affect low level hatchet runners and rats who inflate the economy from the shadows without engaging in PvP or bothering to focus on their tasks. Lastly, for those who would complain about it ruining their early game money making methods, that's kind of the point. This whole discussion is about slowing the growth and inflation of the economy to prevent saturation of gear and money from happening too early. So what can we conclude from this? Other than the fact I'm opinionated and I like the sound of my own voice? Well, I would say that there are definitely some issues with how the economy works in Escape from Tarkov. I wouldn't go as far to say it's broken or that it needs a complete overhaul. I simply think that there are some tweaks here and some new features there that could go a long way to changing the pace of progression in the game, which in turn would address some of the issues that players often protest about, such as the speed at which armor begins to feel useless and best in slot guns become commonplace. Fortunately though, we've seen a whole slew of changes to how quickly the economy grows in 12.9, such as the global reduction in spawn rates that BSG have been tweaking for the past month or so, or the reduction in fuel availability. It's definitely safe to say that the economy is on BSG's radar, and is indeed a cause for concern in some areas. From my understanding, some of these ideas are already being considered by BSG, and I think it would be awesome to see them implemented. It's important that we as a community have these discussions so that BSG can draw upon them and use them to inform their future plans for the game. If you have any thoughts on how to elongate the early game or improve the wipe cycle in other ways, or even if you just want to tell me my ideas are rubbish, comment down below and let me know what you think. I've been AllFunandJames0 and thank you for watching. If you've got this far, why don't you consider liking, subscribing and maybe even heading over to my Twitch to give me a follow. I'd really appreciate it.